Gearbox have affectionately brought the first two games up to date, with a 4K texture pack being added to the Handsome Collection, containing Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel, and of course today, and in focus for this analysis, we also have an entirely updated version of the first classic Borderlands as well, with the Game of the Year edition. Now of course this hails all the way back from 2009 and comes with a bevy of upgraded features and visuals. Of course there are quality of life upgrades that match the feature set of Borderlands 2, certainly in terms of navigating your inventory and lots more besides. But today obviously we're focused on the visuals. How much of an upgrade is it compared to the original version? Right, so to kick off, I thought the best way to deal with this is in the same manner as my Assassin's Creed 3 analysis, where we basically take the PC version maxed out at 4K, the original version on left, and the remastered version on right. So first up, this is also known as the Enhanced Edition on PC. If you have it on Steam, you get this version for free if you own the original Game of the Year edition on PC. All it requires is that you download the whole game over again at 19 gigabytes. That's 19 gigabytes compared to the 12 of the original version, so clearly there's some work going into the textures there, and assets are bulking up the file size overall. So what do you get? Well, yes, you do get texture increases, and the whole premise of this update is to support the 4K standard, so that really was a major prerequisite. So you'll see texture mapping for the guns, the environments, the characters, everything you can lay eyes on is upgraded in resolution to hold up to closer scrutiny when you look really close on a 4K set. With the visuals being as stylized as they are, it's fair to say they can't push the boat out in many other respects. The depth of field, the bloom, the directional shadows all stay in place from the original game. Where we do see a boost is in the addition of FXAA. Where the original version didn't have AA in the settings menu, you at least now have this pass to clean up the jagged edges. Additionally, of course, as you can see from this side by side, the shadows and lighting are improved as well. And on top of that, you also get HDR high dynamic range on console, though it's yet to appear on the PC version. So in a nutshell, that's what you're getting. Nothing crazy. I mean, if you're playing the game, you're going to get the same Borderlands experience as before. And I think personally, the quality of life improvements are probably the bigger deal overall. And a crucial part of that is the fact that multiplayer, the split screen mode, gets bumped from 2 players to 4 in this edition. So you can grab 3 friends and all play on the same screen at the same time, which might bring you back to the good old days. That is in essence what you're getting with the package. Now let's look at the consoles and how they compare in the usual resolution and frame rate analysis side of things. So resolutions first. Every console I'm going to cover between the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One family of machines run with a dynamic resolution. Let's start with the base PS4. What you're getting there is a 1080p as the upper bounds, and largely it will stick at that number. But you will see in, say, big firefights with guns with fire augmentations, you're going to get a low of around 1536 by 864, which comes in at about 80% on each axis. That doesn't happen as often as you might expect, and generally it does hold at 1080p as the upper bounds. Now, Xbox One. Inevitably this one takes bigger hits, and more often the upper bounds is 1080p again, just like PS4, but the lowest point I've found in the same battle is 1440 by 810. Expectedly, that dynamic res kicks in more aggressively overall, though in equal measure when you're outside of battle, Xbox One does hold out at 1080p a lot of the way as well. So pretty good going overall. Next up, there's the enhanced consoles, where the ambition for 4K output really comes to bear. And on PS4 Pro first, we have a range. Certainly, we're not getting 4K here, we're getting a range from 3200 by 1800 as the top number, but at worst in the battle with the guns with fire augmentations setting enemies ablaze, you're going to get a low of 2560 by 1440. So 1440p is the lowest number I've found in this battle here. Meanwhile, on the Xbox One X, we can expect better. In the best case, you're getting a true native 4K, 3840 by 2160, but again, that will go down to the same number as PS4 Pro at 2560 by 1440. So a lot of numbers there, but it is tapering down in image quality as you might expect on every machine, and all of them appear to be backed by FXAA as well. So in terms of the actual core visuals themselves, let's put aside the PlayStation 4 consoles for the moment, because generally speaking, you can get a good sense of the range If we look at the Xbox One and X version side by side, you get the full spectrum of what's possible between each. The main compromises on the base Xbox One are in lower grade anisotropic filtering. As is the case with so many games this generation, it just runs at a lower setting, though you're not going to really notice it given the resolution itself is lower as well. Now, it's worth stressing the textures are fundamentally the same across every console. They match the Enhanced Edition on PC, so you're not losing out there regardless of whether you play on base or Enhanced. What you do miss out on are the high quality shadows, which run at a lower quality preset on base PS4 and Xbox One, a bit more dithered, but nothing too overbearing overall. Elsewhere, the features are intact. You get ambient occlusion, depth of field, and directional shadows enabled as you'd expect from PC. So with all that considered, let's look at performance and how the 60 FPS target is being upheld within the first few hours of play at least. There will obviously be much more to see and do as we go into the game, far more bombastic guns and areas and more enemies, and of course the prospect of multiplayer online as well. But for now, this is a quick sample of what you can expect going in, and so I jumped in with PS4 Pro first to generally get a sense of how the enhanced consoles were doing. It is 60 FPS, but adaptive VSync is being used here to help sustain that 60 FPS feedback. The downside is that there's a lot of full screen tearing up and down, and you're going to catch it when you even go to the first battle. In the first tutorial sequence, there'll just be a kind of cut across the screen, which sadly detracts from the general polish this game could have had. And it goes a little bit further. Even within the first few hours of play, I noticed that the frame rate was tanking a little bit into the 50s, often the mid 50s, though it can potentially go lower here. Generally speaking though, it's been very good, 60 FPS for most of the course of play, with only the occasional streaming hitch or stutter here and there. Now, that goes for the Xbox One X as well, though with far less tearing in that initial battle. As you can see, though a later fight where you pull out the gun with the fire augmentation again shows it has limits, you're still getting a range between 50 to 60 FPS. It's not a great look overall, though generally speaking I found the X ran with less tearing overall. As a general summary, the base consoles also run at the same level of performance overall. You're getting about a 50 to 60 FPS range on each, whether that's the base Xbox One we have here, or moving over to the base PS4. Again, there's tearing up and down the screen in the stress test, but outside of that, it actually runs pretty diligently at 60 FPS, but with screen tear creeping in as you go. So with that in mind, the prospects for the single player experience, within the first few hours at least, are pretty decent. What I really wanted to see after testing all this was the split screen multiplayer and how far the engine could be pushed before we hit some sort of breaking point. Now, I tested this on the PS4 Pro with 2 colleagues in the office. I know it's not maxing it out with 4, but still you get a good sense of where it's at. And to put it bluntly, this conversion instead opts for a 30 FPS cap rather than letting it waver up and down, as it probably would have done if you let all the players go in all guns a-blazing. You've got to imagine that's the right call. We wouldn't have wanted an uneven frame rate, and while it does feel jarring jumping from the single player with its 60 FPS to this 30 FPS cap, it makes sense to the end of giving the refresh some consistency as you play. Now, it is by no means perfect. I took it to the same stress point as the last few tests, and again, when any one player is knocked to the ground and needs reviving, you're going to see the frame rate dip under 30 FPS. It is disappointing, and again, it is coupled by tearing as well. So the outlook isn't as positive as I thought it would be going in. I thought this would be a slam dunk, you know, taking a last gen game and getting it to run at 60 FPS with 4 players. Certainly, it's not running as fluidly as I'd hoped, but as far as I've played so far, it is at least acceptable from the single player standpoint. Whereas for the split screen mode, I wish this ran better, but in the modern age of online focused multiplayer, I am kind of glad to see this mode make the cut at all. Clearly, Borderlands Game of the Year Edition isn't the main event. It's more of an appetizer for Borderlands 3, which will be coming out in October on the current schedule, but at least it's nice to get the first 2 games fully updated to the 4K standard to kind of get us in the mood. Now, port begging really isn't my thing, but I can't help but feel a Switch version of Borderlands would go down really well. Unreal Engine games translate nicely to the hardware as we've seen, and having a co-op shooter with loot would work really well for a handheld, I think. but I think that's one for Gearbox to judge nearer the time. Still, that's all from me today. If you did find this look at Borderlands useful or insightful in any way, please do feel free to give me a like or subscribe. And if you do that, you can go one further by hitting the bell to get notifications as any video lands. To get this video at source file quality, be sure to check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch directly with me or the team, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.
You? One more step